Welcome to PumkinSnatch. Tonight's video is our scary story time. It is part 4 of our continuation series of Kana. Where we left off last time, the husband took out the wife. It looks like Kana might have to fight off some demon creatures soon, and so we'll have to see. But anyway, guys, if you like today's video, please like, comment, and subscribe. I really appreciate it, and I read all of your comments, okay? Alright guys, without further ado, let's get into it.
Long, slender fingers curled around Kana's neck.
Oh my.
Help! Kana managed to whisper as the tall woman's face came closer. Kana could smell the stench of decay coming from the Hachishaku-sama. Her eyes widened as she gazed into the dark, hollow eyes of the demon. In her eyes, she saw Michi picking flowers in a garden. It was the first time Kana had laid eyes on her and realized that she loved her. She saw Michi looking at her shyly and then laughing at something Kana had said.
Spicy.
Someone then came up behind Michi, someone taller and dressed in a dark robe. The man behind Michi grasped the chain around her neck and pulled. Michi cried out as she was dragged away. Kana tried to reach for her, but Michi slipped from her grasp.
Remember what you did?
Hachishaku-sama hissed in her ear.
You have to pay for your sins. You have to return to hell where you belong.
Kana was mesmerized by the vision she was shown in Hachishaku-sama's eyes. The second she saw Michi, her heart was wrenched with pain. She remembered that day. She remembered why she was condemned to hell.
Because she loved her?
Let go of her!
The old man tried to swat away at the tall lady, but she merely glanced at him and scoffed. Kana looked at him desperately as her throat constricted and her breathing was restrained. Just for a moment, she thought she saw the old man hesitate and then saw him step back and look away. Her terror surmounted when she realized he intended to leave her. Her eyes began to flicker as her vision darkened, and that's when she heard the incantation. The voice was urgent and low. Kana saw wisps of brilliant light, and then suddenly she heard a sound. A child's laughter, pure and happy. Kana thought she was imagining it all, but then suddenly the grip around her neck loosened. She gasped for breath and watched as the 8-foot-tall lady glided towards the woods. Kana blinked several times, unable to comprehend what she was witnessing. It's a mirage, the old man wheezed. A spell that I used. There's nothing more a Hachishaku-sama loves than stalking a young one. Kana turned her head and clutched her painful neck. The Hachishaku-sama was following a child that kept skipping away from her reach. It will keep her occupied for some time. I cannot fathom for how long, the old man replied. It will keep her distracted and away from you. Once the magic wears off, however... She will come after me again? Kana coughed and got to her feet. She dusted the dirt off her hands. You couldn't just trap her using your magic?
No,
the old man narrowed his eyes. You can be very ungrateful. It was just a question, she shot back. If I could, I would. Kana stared at the old man dubiously. The old man began moving again, but Kana didn't follow him immediately. It was true that the old man had saved her, but she couldn't help but feel like he was hiding something from her. Are you coming? The old man asked impatiently. Kana dug her feet into the ground. Why are you helping me? Because you need it, out came the reply. Kana was still not convinced. The old man had dragged her out of hell and had saved her from a yokai. She couldn't imagine he would go through that much trouble for a stranger. He needed something. She could sense it, but couldn't imagine what. Where are we going? The old man shrugged, causing another clanging sound that made him appear comical. First, we must find a way to conceal that scar from more yokai attacks. I have an idea, and I think... I want to see my mother, Kana interjected. She held her chest. She didn't know why, but something suddenly felt very wrong, and she felt like she was being beckoned home. She turned on her heels and began walking briskly towards her home. I wouldn't advise that, he called out. Then, after a pause, he spoke again. "All right, I will accompany you." Kana turned her head to look at him.
Interesting. He's
There it
coming.
was again, his insistence to join her. Just as she knew with all her heart that her mother wanted to see her, she also knew with utmost certainty that the old man needed something from her,
Maybe he
or he
wants
wanted to
scar.
use her.
The power.
She would have to be careful around him.
I wouldn't
Toshihiro
take
was
him to
once the most
curb.
powerful man in the country. He'd become emperor at a very young age and was married off quickly to produce heirs, and had several
Okay.
loyal men who followed his every command. He never abused the trust of anyone and ruled the country with a firm hand, but also with kindness. The
With
people loved him
kindness.
and revered him for being just in his actions.
But why is
His
he
wife
in
was
hell?
faithful and loving, but following the birth of their third son, she passed away.
Oh, poor thing.
Toshihiro couldn't bring himself to remarry and took care of his 3 sons with love. He made sure that they received a quality education and were humble and disciplined.
Nice. Good.
But as
good,
the boys
good.
grew older, he began to notice that his youngest son, Akihito, was developing a desire for dark arts.
Oh,
Toshihiro
no.
came from a line of sorcerers, but had never
Interesting.
once honed his skills nor used them to rule his kingdom. He knew that magic, good or bad, had consequences. Somehow his youngest, Akihito, had learned that he had the blood of one of the greatest sorcerers and decided to practice it.
Good.
But
no,
it was
good.
never for good.
Well,
He abused
magic
animals
is
and
magic.
birds, and on more than one occasion he had used his powers on servants,
why?
dismembering them in the process.
No, that's a problem.
Although he had taken a vow to never use his powers, Toshihiro had to use his magic to help save his elder son from falling off the roof after being put in a trance by his youngest brother.
That is bad.
Toshihiro punished Akihito and had him put in a cell until he promised he would never use his magic again. His youngest son did promise, but it was all a lie.
Of course it was.
Toshihiro had gone off to another kingdom to discuss the terms of trade. When he returned more than a month later, he returned to a palace full of corpses.
So the son wanted revenge
The
for
servants,
being
the guards, and
punished.
his 2 sons lay in a
Wow.
pool of blood. He entered the throne room and saw
Wow.
his son sitting casually on the throne and licking blood from his fingers.
Oh my.
Beside him stood a tall man in dark robes.
You've finally returned, Akihito said with disinterest. Jiro and I have been awaiting your arrival.
Toshihiro called for his guards who had accompanied
I
him
feel
on his
like
trip.
This is gonna be good.
None of them came.
Whoa.
While you were looking at the corpses, I had Jiro put the guards in a trance. They answer only to me now.
Oh my.
Toshihiro came forward. "What is the meaning of this? Did you kill your brothers? How low have you sunk? How could you do this to your family?
This
Get up from my
is
throne.
wild.
You have not earned it."
But I have, Akihito smirked. I did kill everyone who got in the way of me and my throne. All
Oh,
that is left
wow.
is you, old man.
Toshihiro grew enraged. "I made a promise to never use my powers, but I will willingly break that solemn vow to defeat you."
Jiro,
The man in the
Oh,
black robes immediately
goodness.
stepped forward in front of Akihito and conjured a ball of fire. Toshihiro murmured an incantation, and the
Oh,
fireball
wow.
was extinguished. Akihito, who had one leg over the armrest and was slumped on the throne, suddenly sat up. He looked nervously at his father
Yeah.
and his magician.
Jiro, defeat him. It is an order.
So
"I am more
he's-
powerful than him." Toshihiro raised a hand and muttered a
Nervous.
spell. Jiro twisted on his feet and fell to the ground.
Oh
Akihito
boy.
stood as Jiro
He
writhed in
broke his
pain.
ankle.
Stop it at once.
"I'm not the one who started this. I never wanted to use my powers to hurt anyone, but I have no choice but to use them on you. You have dishonored the gift of magic, and who has slain his brothers for the throne.
Oh my goodness.
The throne is still mine. I am the emperor." Akihito
That's
grew
right.
frightened by his father's outburst. He raised his hand and began to utter an incantation.
Jiro, contain him. Say the spell with me, Akihito ordered.
Jiro cried out in pain but still
He's
managed to
power
recite a
hungry.
spell. Toshihiro came forward and used his powers to slam Jiro against the wall.
Wow.
The magician groaned in pain, then uttered a spell as he tried to get to his feet. Toshihiro raised his hand and began a protection spell for himself when Akihito lunged at him.
Now,
His son roared.
So
Juro's
he's-
spell grew
there's
louder in
fight.
Toshihiro's ears.
Holy
He
cow.
felt something inside him weaken. "Finish him off!" Akihito demanded. Juro kept reciting the spell, and Toshihiro used the
Over
last of
and
his
over and
strength to
over.
pull his son away and strike Juro. Their powers collided, and all were thrown back with the force of the impact.
Oh my
Toshihiro
goodness.
opened his eyes. He wasn't dead, but something was wrong. He felt heaviness in his chest, and his limbs felt weak. He heard Akihito scowl. "That's not what I wanted. I wanted him dead." "But the power inside him was too hard to battle. This is the best I can
What?
do. He can't rule the kingdom like that, can he?" Toshihiro tried to get up, and when he couldn't, he looked down at himself, and he saw that his body seemed oddly curved and large. His limbs had
no.
shriveled, yet he still had some strength. But deep inside, he knew the magic inside him had waned a little. He had been protected from death, but at the cost of most of his magic.
So he
"Forgive
turned to a
me,"
pot.
Juro pleaded. Akihito took out his sword and decapitated the magician.
Wow.
Toshihiro, realizing he was at a disadvantage, rolled quietly to the side. No doubt his son wanted to use the sword on him next. He winced as every movement cost a great deal of energy. If Juro had been spared, there was still a chance for the magic to be reversed. With him dead, turning back to his former self would pose a challenge.
Oh no.
Toshihiro hid from his son,
Poor
even as
guy.
Akihito launched an extensive search for him. Every room was checked, and every door was opened. The guards, who were entranced, did Akihito's every bidding.
So his son
It
ruled
was
like
easy
that.
for
I
Toshihiro
see.
to hide. His short stature allowed him to hide behind furniture and screens. He used his body as an advantage. He had seen himself in the mirror. The idiotic and inept Juro had turned him into a cooking pot.
A cooking
year
pot,
passed.
Simply.
And Toshihiro hid in the palace, not knowing where else to go. He saw how cruel his son was, and how he had adopted tyranny as a means to rule the kingdom.
Sad.
His
That's
kingdom
really
was
unfortunate.
plunged into darkness and despair. Akihito did marry, but was not once faithful. He had several affairs with many women and the maids.
Oh, okay.
One of them had even gotten pregnant. She was unceremoniously thrown away from the palace when he found
Oh.
out.
Oh boy,
It wasn't
this is all
until
coming
5 years
together,
had
guys.
passed that Toshihiro overheard a magician conversing with Akihito. The magician explained to Akihito that his powers had greatly reduced after he had used them to create gold and jewels and put people into trances.
Oh.
The magician warned him that once the magic wore off, his wealth that was made through magic would disappear too.
Interesting.
His only hope was to sacrifice his child. The child would have powers within him or her. Those powers could be unleashed and absorbed by a family member.
Oh.
Akihito grew depressed. His wife had borne children, but none of them had survived.
Oh my goodness.
He decided to execute his wife and marry another woman.
Oh
She
my
failed to
gosh.
bear any children at all, and Akihito considered using magic to create a child. The magician warned him that doing so was against the rules of nature,
This is so
and a child could
fascinating.
only be born into this world naturally. Akihito grew frustrated and remarried once more. This time there was a child, but he was stillborn, and so he
Oh.
executed his wife once more.
Dang.
As time passed, the doctors advised Akihito that he had developed an ailment, and he would not be able to produce children.
Oh.
Toshihiro had smiled at the news. His son hadn't realized that overusing magic took a toll on the body.
I bet he's
What's more?
mad.
His son had quite forgotten that he did have a child with a maid that he had thrown out years ago. But Toshihiro hadn't forgotten, and so after 10 years in hiding, he finally left the palace to go in search of the child.
So he can get freed from his imprisonment. I see, I see. Fascinating. So it looks like, okay, so the emperor's still around. Okay, I thought like the emperor hot king guy had been in hell for a really long time, but now this is kind of implying that like they're not even in hell, and so that's interesting. So the girl, she has apparently the ability to maybe use the power, that her father, has. So that's interesting. So we're definitely going to find out how this story ends, guys. I hope you guys like that video. I'm very interested to see how this all works, but I need to go back and see what happened between these two here. Clearly, clearly there's something going on. My guess, if I had to guess, maybe like the girl should have originally perished, but for some reason this girl here perished. They didn't deserve it, and maybe that's why. But alright, if you liked the video, like, comment, and subscribe. Until the next time, guys, take care. Bye.